There's a single word that could transform your entire life, yet most of us are terrified to say it. It's not love, it's not yes, it's not maybe, it's no. Right now, as you're listening to this, you're probably carrying the weight of a dozen commitments you never really wanted to make, attending events that drain you and saying yes to people who wouldn't hesitate to say no to you. What if I told you that your inability to say no isn't kindness? It's a form of self-betrayal so deep that it's slowly erasing who you really are. If this strikes something raw inside you, hit subscribe. This channel explores the truths about human psychology that most people are too afraid to confront. And today, we're diving into the most powerful boundary you'll ever set. Welcome back to the inner light. I'm here to talk about something that might make you uncomfortable, but that's exactly why we need to discuss it. The power of saying no isn't just about declining invitations or avoiding extra work. It's about recognizing that your energy is sacred, finite, and entirely under your control, if you choose to claim that control. Carl Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, requires us to differentiate ourselves from the collective expectations and demands placed upon us. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you're not just being agreeable, you're participating in your own psychological fragmentation. You're splitting yourself between who you are and who you think others need you to be. Today, we're going to explore 5 transformative chapters about the power of no. We'll uncover why saying no feels so terrifying, how people-pleasing becomes a prison, the spiritual significance of boundaries, the art of protecting your creative energy, and finally, how saying no becomes an act of profound self-love. By the end of this journey, you'll understand that saying no isn't selfish. It's the most generous thing you can do for both yourself and the world around you. Chapter 1. The Psychology of Yes. Why we're afraid to say no. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. Most of us learn to say yes, not out of love, but out of fear. Somewhere in your childhood you discovered that saying no had consequences. Maybe it meant disappointing a parent, losing approval, or facing anger. Maybe you learned that your worth was tied to your usefulness, that love was conditional on your compliance. These early experiences created what psychologists call a fawn response, an automatic tendency to please others at the expense of your own needs. The fawn response is one of 4 survival mechanisms, alongside fight, flight, and freeze. When we fawn, we instinctively try to avoid conflict by becoming what we think others want us to be. It's a trauma response disguised as kindness, and it's running more lives than we care to admit. You might recognize this pattern in yourself, the automatic, "sure, I can do that," before you've even processed what's being asked of you, the guilt that floods through you when you even consider saying no, the way you rehearse elaborate explanations and apologies for the smallest boundaries. But here's what's really happening when you chronically say yes. You're not actually being kind or generous. You're operating from a place of psychological terror, terror of rejection, abandonment, or conflict. Jung called this living from the persona, the mask we wear to be acceptable to others rather than from our authentic self. Every yes that should be a no moves you further away from who you really are and deeper into a life that feels increasingly foreign and exhausting. Consider Sarah, a woman I know who found herself volunteering for every committee, accepting every social invitation, and taking on extra projects at work she had no time for. She told herself she was being helpful, community-minded, a good friend. But underneath, she was operating from a deep fear that if she said no, people would discover she wasn't as valuable as she pretended to be. Her yes wasn't generosity. It was a desperate attempt to prove her worth through exhaustion. The cost of this pattern extends far beyond mere tiredness. When you constantly override your own instincts and needs, you begin to lose touch with them entirely. You stop knowing what you actually want, what you actually enjoy, what actually matters to you. Your inner compass becomes so confused by the noise of others' expectations that it can no longer point toward your true north. You become a stranger to yourself, living a life that looks successful from the outside, but feels hollow from within. The fear of saying no often stems from what psychologists call catastrophic thinking, the belief that setting a boundary will result in complete rejection or abandonment. But this fear is usually rooted in childhood experiences that are no longer relevant to your adult reality. The people who truly love and respect you will not only accept your boundaries, they'll be relieved that you're finally being honest about your limits. Those who react poorly to your no were never really interested in your well-being anyway. Chapter 2. The Prison of People-Pleasing. People-pleasing isn't a personality trait. It's a prison you've built around yourself, one yes at a time. And like any prison, the walls become so familiar that you forget they're not protecting you, they're containing you. The people-pleaser believes they're being selfless, but there's a hidden selfishness in chronic yes-saying that we rarely acknowledge. When you say yes to everything, you're not actually present for anything. You're spread so thin that your contributions become shallow, your attention divided, your energy depleted. The people-pleaser operates from what psychologists call an external locus of control, the belief that your worth, safety, and happiness depend entirely on others' reactions to you. This creates an exhausting cycle where you're constantly monitoring others' emotions, trying to anticipate their needs, and adjusting your behavior to maintain their approval. You become a performer in your own life, always on stage, never allowed to rest. But here's the cruel irony of people-pleasing. It rarely actually pleases people. When you say yes to everything, your yes becomes meaningless. People can sense the resentment underneath your compliance, the way you're not fully present because you're overwhelmed and overcommitted. They can feel that your yes isn't authentic, and this creates an unconscious discomfort in relationships. The very thing you're doing to be liked often makes you less likable because it's not genuine. Jung wrote extensively about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny or repress. For the chronic people-pleaser, anger and resentment live in the shadow. You tell yourself you don't mind helping, you don't mind being overlooked, you don't mind sacrificing your own needs. But that suppressed anger doesn't disappear. It ferments. It shows up as passive aggression, as sudden explosions over seemingly small things, as a growing sense of bitterness toward the very people you're trying so hard to please. Think about the last time you said yes to something you didn't want to do. Notice how the resentment began building immediately. Maybe you told yourself it was fine, that you were being a good person, but underneath, a part of you was keeping score. This is your authentic self, trying to communicate with you, trying to tell you that your boundaries have been violated, not by others, but by yourself. The people-pleasing prison has invisible bars made of assumptions that have never been tested. You assume that saying no will damage relationships, but you've never actually tried it consistently. You assume that others need you to say yes to function, but you've never given them the chance to prove their resilience. You assume that your worth depends on your usefulness, but you've never explored whether people might value you simply for who you are, not what you do. Breaking free from people-pleasing requires grieving the image you've had of yourself as the helpful one, the reliable one, the one who never says no. This identity might have served you once, helping you feel needed and important, but it's become a cage that's suffocating your authentic self. The path to freedom involves disappointing some people, and this feels terrifying when your entire sense of self has been built around avoiding disappointment. Chapter 3. The Spiritual Significance of Boundaries. In many spiritual traditions, there's a dangerous misunderstanding about selflessness that keeps sincere seekers trapped in patterns of self-abandonment. We're told to be of service, to put others first, to deny the ego. But true spiritual maturity requires something far more nuanced, the wisdom to know when giving serves the highest good and when it enables dysfunction, both in yourself and others. The Buddha spoke of the middle way, the path between indulgence and extreme asceticism. This principle applies directly to our boundaries. Saying yes to everything isn't spiritual. It's a form of spiritual bypassing, where we use the language of service to avoid the difficult work of knowing ourselves and honoring our authentic needs. When you say yes from depletion, when you give from emptiness, you're not offering a gift. You're offering the dregs of what's left after you've neglected yourself. Consider this. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you're teaching others that your boundaries don't matter. You're training them to see you as infinitely available, endlessly accommodating, without needs or limits of your own. This isn't kindness, it's enabling. You're actually preventing others from developing their own capacity for self-reliance, problem-solving, and respect for boundaries. Your chronic yes-saying can become a form of unconscious control, making others dependent on your availability rather than empowering them to grow. In the mystical traditions, there's a concept called sacred selfishness, the recognition that taking care of your own spiritual and emotional needs isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic service. When you protect your energy, when you say no to what depletes you, you create space for deeper yeses. You become available for the contributions that truly align with your gifts, your purpose, your authentic calling. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires differentiating yourself from the collective. This means learning to discern between the voice of others' expectations and the voice of your own soul. Every boundary you set is an act of listening more deeply to your inner wisdom. Every no you speak is a declaration that you trust your inner guidance more than external pressure. The spiritual significance of saying no extends beyond personal boundaries into the realm of energy protection. In many traditions, practitioners learn to shield themselves from energies that don't serve their highest good. Saying no is perhaps the most practical form of energy protection available to us. When you decline commitments that drain you, when you step away from relationships that diminish you, when you refuse to absorb others' emotional chaos, you're engaging in a form of spiritual hygiene that's essential for inner clarity. There's also a profound trust required in saying no. Trust that the universe doesn't need you to say yes to everything for things to work out. Trust that others are capable of handling disappointment, finding alternative solutions, growing through challenges. Trust that your worth isn't dependent on your constant availability. This trust is itself a spiritual practice, a form of surrender that paradoxically gives you more power over your own life. Chapter 4. Protecting your creative and vital energy. Your energy is not unlimited. This seems obvious, yet we live as if it were infinite, as if we can pour ourselves out endlessly without consequence. But just as you wouldn't leave your car running with the doors open in winter, you can't leave your energy running toward everything and everyone without eventually finding yourself completely depleted. Creative energy is particularly precious and particularly vulnerable. It's the force that allows you to innovate, to problem solve, to bring something new into the world. But creative energy is also the first to be sacrificed when you're overcommitted and overwhelmed. When you say yes to too many demands on your time and attention, you're essentially choosing to be a consumer of others' ideas rather than a creator of your own. Think about the last time you felt truly creative, truly inspired. You were probably well rested, had some solitude, felt emotionally balanced. Creativity requires what psychologists call diffuse attention, the ability to let your mind wander, to make unexpected connections, to access the deeper layers of consciousness where insight emerges. This state is impossible when you're constantly responding to external demands, when your nervous system is in perpetual activation mode from overcommitment. The protection of vital energy through saying no isn't just about creativity. It's about maintaining your capacity for presence, for deep thinking, for emotional availability to the people and projects that truly matter. When you're spread too thin, you become shallow in everything. Your conversations become surface level because you don't have the energy for depth. Your work becomes mechanical because you don't have the resources for innovation. Your relationships become transactional because you don't have the emotional bandwidth for genuine connection. Many high achievers fall into what I call the productivity trap, the belief that saying yes to more opportunities will lead to greater success and fulfillment. But the opposite is often true. The most successful and fulfilled people are often the most selective about what they say yes to. They understand that every yes is also a no to something else, and they choose their yeses with the precision of a master craftsperson selecting tools. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in history, attributes much of his success to his ability to say no. He speaks of having a too hard pile for investment opportunities that don't meet his strict criteria. This same principle applies to your life energy. You need a too hard pile for commitments that don't align with your values, goals, or current capacity. The practice of protecting your energy through boundaries also involves recognizing energy vampires, situations, activities, and yes, people who consistently drain more energy than they contribute to your life. This doesn't make them bad people, but it does make them poor investments of your limited energy. Learning to identify these energy drains and limit your exposure to them isn't selfish. It's wise stewardship of your most precious resource. Your vital energy is also connected to your sense of purpose and meaning. When you're constantly saying yes to things that don't align with your deeper values and goals, you experience what psychologists call values conflict, a form of internal stress that's particularly depleting. Every action that moves you away from your authentic path requires more energy than actions that align with who you really are. Chapter 5. The Art of Saying No as Self-Love. The deepest truth about saying no is this: it's not about rejecting others, it's about embracing yourself. Every no you speak to what doesn't serve you is a yes. You speak to your own worth, your own needs, your own dreams that have been waiting patiently in the wings while you tend to everyone else's priorities. Self-love isn't about positive affirmations or bubble baths, though those have their place. Real self-love is about making choices that honor your well-being, even when those choices are difficult or disappointing to others. It's about treating yourself with the same consideration you'd show to someone you deeply love. Would you encourage someone you love to exhaust themselves trying to please everyone? Would you want them to sacrifice their dreams to meet others' expectations? The way you treat yourself teaches others how to treat you. The art of saying no requires developing what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to sit with the discomfort that comes when you disappoint others or face conflict. This discomfort is temporary, but the damage from chronic people-pleasing is cumulative and long-lasting. Learning to tolerate the short-term discomfort of setting boundaries prevents the long-term pain of losing yourself entirely. But saying no skillfully also involves compassion, both for yourself and others. You can set boundaries without being harsh, decline requests without being cruel, protect your energy without being cold. The key is to communicate your no from a place of self-respect rather than defensiveness, from clarity rather than guilt. When you say no from a centered place, people can feel the difference. They may be disappointed, but they'll also sense that your no comes from wisdom rather than selfishness. There's also an art to the partial no, offering alternatives that honor both your boundaries and others' needs when possible. Instead of taking on an entire project you don't have time for, you might offer to consult for an hour. Instead of attending an event that drains you, you might suggest meeting the person individually later. These creative solutions show that saying no doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to find sustainable ways to contribute. The practice of saying no as self-love also involves learning to trust your first instinct. Your body often knows whether something is right for you before your mind can analyze all the variables. That immediate sense of expansion or contraction when someone makes a request is valuable information. Learning to honor these subtle signals is part of developing what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to bridge conscious and unconscious wisdom. As you develop the skill of loving no's, you'll notice that your yeses become more powerful. When people know that your yes means something, when they know you're selective about your commitments, your agreement carries more weight. Your presence becomes more valuable because it's not guaranteed. Your contributions become more meaningful because they come from choice rather than obligation. The ultimate expression of saying no as self-love is recognizing that your life is finite and precious. Every moment you spend on something that doesn't align with your values, every hour you give to someone who doesn't appreciate it, every day you live according to others' expectations rather than your own authentic desires, these are irreplaceable pieces of your one wild and precious life that you're giving away. The power of saying no isn't about becoming selfish or uncaring. It's about becoming selective and authentic. It's about recognizing that your energy, your time, your attention are sacred resources that deserve to be invested wisely rather than scattered carelessly. When you learn to say no to what doesn't serve you, you create space for what does. You become available for the relationships that nourish you, the work that fulfills you, the experiences that help you grow. The journey from chronic yes-saying to skillful boundary setting isn't easy. It requires unlearning years of conditioning, facing fears of rejection and conflict, and tolerating the discomfort of disappointing others. But on the other side of this discomfort lies something precious, a life that actually belongs to you, relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided giving, and the energy to pursue what truly matters to you. Remember, every master craftsperson knows that the power lies not just in what you include, but in what you leave out. The sculptor reveals the statue by removing everything that isn't essential. Your life becomes a work of art through the same process, saying no to everything that isn't truly you, until what remains is authentic, meaningful, and entirely your own. Your no is not a wall, it's a gateway to a life lived on your own terms, relationships built on genuine connection rather than obligation, and the deep satisfaction that comes from aligning your actions with your authentic self. The word no might be small, but its power to transform your life is infinite. If this resonates with something deep inside you, if you recognize yourself in these patterns, leave a comment below. Share your own journey with boundaries, your struggles with saying no, your victories in reclaiming your energy. Subscribe to continue exploring the depths of human psychology and the path to authentic living. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who's lost themselves in the maze of everyone else's expectations, share this with them. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is help others find their way back to themselves.